No figure in literature captivates us quite like the trickster, who emerges across cultures in countless folkloric forms. Unlike the innocent fool who stumbles through life, unaware of impending dangers, walking joyfully toward cliff edges while lost in dreams, the trickster operates with deliberate cunning and wit. This archetypal figure serves as the foundation for all picaresque literature, yet remains impossible to reduce to a single definition. Trickster tales represent humanity's oldest expressions, existing since antiquity as fundamental building blocks of civilization and culture itself. The nature of the trickster. Tricksters embody chaos. They shatter rules, orchestrate mischief, master deception, and dissolve boundaries. As one scholar notes, the boundary is where he will be found, sometimes drawing the line, sometimes crossing it, sometimes erasing or moving it, but always there, the god of the threshold in all its forms. These perpetual wanderers inhabit liminal spaces, always on the road, as lords of the in-between. Every attempt to pin down their origins becomes another opportunity for them to slip away, crossing our conceptual boundaries even as we try to define them. This elusiveness teaches us our first lesson. The trickster always stays one step ahead. Those who fall prey to con artists and charlatans remain unconscious of trickster energy, deceived by their own naivety, greed, or self-delusion. Ironically, we must cultivate our own trickster awareness to avoid being tricked. Even well-intentioned people can become unconscious tricksters, genuinely believing they help others while actually deceiving them. When both deceiver and deceived remain unaware, the trickster operates as a destructive, autonomous force. Paradoxically, the trickster sometimes appears as a truth-teller whom we refuse to believe. Historical manifestations. Medieval jesters exemplified the trickster's truth-telling function. Alone among courtiers, they possessed royal permission to speak uncomfortable truths. Their caps, bells, and full scepters mirroring and mocking the king's crown and staff. The trickster awakens within us during childhood as ego consciousness develops. This represents our most primitive step toward heroic development, yet remains essential for achieving psychological maturity. As one analysis explains, the trickster cycle corresponds to the earliest and least developed period of life. Trickster is a figure whose physical appetites dominate his behavior. He has the mentality of an infant. This figure, which at the outset assumes the form of an animal, passes from one mischievous exploit to another, but as he does so, a change comes over him. At the end of his rogue's progress, he is beginning to take on the physical likeness of a grown man. Psychological dynamics. The trickster mirrors the Freudian id, that primitive psychological component present from birth, demanding instant gratification of physical needs, emotional impulses, and drives. This force perpetually conflicts with the superego's internalized cultural rules that enable socially acceptable behavior. Accordingly, tricksters typically display enormous libidos and frequently engage with scatological themes. Even innocent games like peekaboo represent early trickster manifestations, as parents playfully deceive children to provoke laughter. The trickster emerges when we become overly serious, rigid, or rule-bound, when we lose our sense of humor. He makes us forget important things, say regrettable words, commit Freudian slips, and burst into unexpected laughter. Nietzsche understood laughter's profound significance, writing, "I would really allow myself to order the ranks of philosophers according to the rank of their laughter, right up to those who are capable of golden laughter. And assuming that the gods also practice philosophy, I don't doubt that in the process they know how to laugh in a superhuman and new way, and at the expense of all serious things. The sacred function of play. Laughter bridges sacred and profane realms where the trickster dwells, representing our attitude toward life, and especially ourselves, our capacity for self-mockery. true laughter constitutes profound inner work, shattering our personas and opening us to deeper messages. The trickster reveals life as theatrical performance, with us as actors following predetermined scripts on a vast stage. Yet, he also proclaims our freedom to improvise, create our own narratives, and embrace rather than fear our mistakes, finding humor in them instead. And responsibility forms a cornerstone of existentialist philosophy, urging us toward authenticity and self-discovery. While we might deceive others or suffer deception ourselves, we cannot ultimately deceive ourselves. The trickster forces confrontation with our mirror image, exposing the personas we project to impress others at the expense of our instinctual needs, creativity, and vital playfulness. Agent of cultural transformation. The trickster opposes all authority because he prioritizes self-interest, refusing to subordinate himself to others. He punctures rigid boundaries and challenges fundamental assumptions about social organization, revealing transformation possibilities even for questionable purposes. This archetypal figure compels us to question power structures and the limitations they impose. His disruptive energy sweeps in to deliver hard lessons, attempting to awaken both individuals and cultures. He highlights societal folly, addresses controversial topics with wit, illuminates shadowy areas, and draws public attention to social underbellies. Comedians serve as modern trickster messengers, often at great personal cost to their mental well-being. These cultural figures perform essential social functions. When comedy faces suppression, severe consequences follow as the trickster remains unconscious, but he will find alternative outlets, manifesting as neurosis if ignored. Since doubt precedes change and the trickster embodies transformation itself, our problem lies not in doubt but in our fear of change. Confronting doubt's risks proves necessary for individual growth. As a change agent, the trickster triggers transformation anxiety while serving as an essential, if uncomfortable, companion on the growth journey. Order, chaos, and creation. Life's totality encompasses both order and chaos, with the trickster embodying chaotic spirit. He represents the Dionysian god of wine and music, connecting us to instinctual forces beyond civilized boundaries, seeking to shatter conventions and lead us into untamed territories. Nietzsche, self-proclaimed last disciple of Dionysus, understood this necessity. I say to you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Without chaos, societies lose cultural vitality, becoming stale, flawed, and bureaucratic. Therefore, the trickster simultaneously destroys outdated values and creates new ones, reshaping the world through inner magic that continuously weaves old into new. Despite their disruptive behavior, tricksters receive honor as culture creators, imagined not only as thieves who stole essential goods from heaven for humanity, but as world shapers who made Earth hospitable for human life. Beyond creation, the trickster teaches our universal capacity for destruction. Trickster is at one and the same time creator and destroyer, giver and negator, he who dupes and who is always duped himself. The shadow's revelation. Individuals who appear excessively kind or pure while suppressing authentic emotions may suddenly engage in self-destructive or sinful behavior. Intuitively, we sense something off about such people, recognizing their projected personas. The trickster compels them to act precisely as consciousness forbids, tricking them into revealing their true nature. Rather than living at extremes, we must achieve balance by integrating our shadow aspects, allowing the psyche to compensate toward equilibrium and wholeness. Though commonly viewed negatively due to his disruptive nature, the trickster transcends moral categories. He knows neither good nor evil, yet bears responsibility for both, possessing light and dark aspects while maintaining essential playfulness that defines his character. The trickster operates without moral or social values, driven by passions and appetites. Yet through his actions, all values emerge. His creative cleverness amazes us and preserves possibilities for transcending routine social restrictions. Unlike the devil as evil's agent, the trickster remains amoral rather than immoral. Morality represents social and ego-conscious structures. The unconscious follows different rules. The trickster epitomizes human paradox, occupying liminal unity, simultaneously neither this nor that, yet both. We struggle to comprehend paradox and contradiction, to grasp how unity might underlie apparent duality. Shapeshifter and mythological presence. The trickster adopts various animal forms: fox, raven, monkey, coyote, hare, spider, yet possesses no fixed identity. As a shapeshifter flowing like liquid, he remains perpetually elusive, appearing in any guise and imitating other forms. We recognize trickster energy through its very changeability and provocative actions. Whatever form he assumes, he remains a primordial being equivalent to mythological gods and heroes. Greek mythology presents Prometheus as the trickster who stole divine fire for humanity, angering the gods because humans weren't prepared to use this power creatively and unselfishly. Yet this act defined our humanity, as fire proved essential for human evolution. Here we encounter paradox. What enables human progress also threatens our destruction. Consider artificial intelligence or technological singularity. When punished, the trickster becomes replaced by stupidity. Prometheus suffers divine punishment and replacement by his brother Epimetheus, the forethinker replaced by the afterthinker. Within them, we might say, a single primitive being, simultaneously sly and stupid, has been divided. Cross-cultural manifestations. African American folklore presents Brer Rabbit as sympathetic underdog, weaker than opponents, yet gaining audience sympathy. Through mischievous nature, he creates trouble, then must employ cleverness and deception to outsmart larger, stronger animals and escape difficulty. African tradition offers Anansi the spider, a morally ambiguous figure who deceives humans and gods through form-changing abilities. Yet some also cast him as divine creator who spun the world into existence, bringing stories and wisdom to humanity. Native American culture features Iktomi, the spider trickster spirit formerly called wisdom but stripped of this title due to troublemaking. His failed malicious plans typically taught lessons to youth. He provides dream catchers for protection, while folk tales reveal simultaneous respect, fear, and mockery toward him. According to prophecy, his web would spread across the land interpretable as telephone networks and the Internet's World Wide Web. Iktomi has long been considered patron of new technology, with myths providing ways for the psyche to examine itself. Many Native Americans view Iktomi as Europeans' god, claiming they readily follow his bizarre behavior and self-entrapping tricks. Coyote represents another crucial Native American trickster figure, with Reynard the fox serving as European equivalent. Norse mythology's popular Loki demonstrates the trickster god through mischief that causes beloved Baldur's death. His punishment foreshadows Ragnarok, the cosmic destruction of gods and their maintained universe. Binding the trickster destroys the world. Divine mediation and protection. Greek Hermes functions as troublemaker, thief, and beneficent creator who brought fire, music, and other gifts to humanity. Born as outsider, desiring insider status, he wins Zeus's admiration and Olympian position through trickster exploits like cattle theft. As divine trickster, psychopomp, and divine messenger, Hermes negotiates boundaries between human and divine, material and spiritual realms. Uniquely among gods, he traverses all three domains: Olympus, Earth, and Underworld, possibly mediating between dream and waking consciousness. Hermes represents a third life path beyond Apollonian rationality and Dionysian irrationality, serving as the god of jokes and journeys, the soul's tricky guide. When enemies invaded his city, Hermes disguised himself as shepherd, carrying a ram to create safety wherever he walked, demonstrating protection and alliance. This echoes Jesus as good shepherd carrying lost sheep. The trickster god also embodies protective energy, ritual and sacred expression. Many tribes use masks to abandon individual personalities, becoming possessed by trickster spirits. Ritual provides essential trickster context. Without ritual settings, trickster energy remains absent. Tribal behavior becomes eccentric, comic, and crude, yet sacredness connects these qualities with fertility, wellness, and joy. The trickster's ambiguous character reveals close connections between sacred and profane realms. The trickster strikes profound human chords, performing fundamental cultural work. Understanding the trickster better means understanding ourselves better, particularly unconscious aspects that respond to his unsettling, transformative behavior. Jungian analysis, the archetypal foundation. Describing trickster phenomena means describing ourselves. He serves as speculum mentis, a mental mirror common to all humanity that historically provided worldviews and self-understanding. This represents primarily psychological attempts to solve both internal and external problems. Carl Jung identifies the trickster as archetype within the collective unconscious, inherited, universal structures present in everyone, deeper than personal unconscious layers formed through life experience. Archetypes function as primordial patterns from ancestral experience, serving as primary sources of psychic symbols that attract and structure energy, ultimately creating civilization and culture. The trickster exists everywhere as an eternal mental state. Archetypes manifest cross-culturally as recurring images, symbols, and motifs throughout mythological, religious, and artistic history. Examples include the wise old man, great mother, hero, and trickster. The trickster uniquely attacks all other archetypes. Jung noted that archetypes number as many as typical life situations, remaining unobservable, yet significantly impacting personal activities and thought patterns. They emerge from deep, dark places where impulses and instincts originate, functioning as soul organs comprising unconscious structure. These living personalities within us operate autonomously and numinously. Given sufficient energy, archetypes can control individuals. Historical spiritual manifestations. The unconscious predates consciousness as primordial source from which awareness arises. Our conscious life dresses and guides actions, but nothing appears in consciousness without unconscious roots. Trickster mythological features extend even to humanity's highest spiritual developments. Early medieval churches witnessed strange customs, Jung describes. In the very midst of divine service, masquerades with grotesque faces, disguised as women, lions, and mummers, performed their dances, sang indecent songs in the choir, ate their greasy food from a corner of the altar near the priest celebrating mass, got out their games of dice, burned a stinking incense made of old shoe leather, and ran and hopped about all over the church. These popular pagan rituals required considerable effort to eliminate from churches, yet the trickster phantom continues haunting mythology throughout ages. Jung identifies the trickster as obviously a psychologium, an archetypal psychic structure of extreme antiquity. In his clearest manifestations, he is a faithful reflection of an absolutely undifferentiated human consciousness, corresponding to a psyche that has hardly left the animal level, consciousness, evolution, and shadow integration. The trickster myth reflects earlier, rudimentary consciousness stages collective personifications emerging from individual aggregates, welcomed by each person as familiar knowledge. This wouldn't occur if merely individual developments. If myths were simply historical remnants, we must ask why they haven't vanished into the past, yet continue influencing civilization's highest levels. The trickster points to primitive consciousness stages existing before mythological birth. Only when consciousness reached higher levels could we detach from earlier states and articulate them. He, the trickster, is a forerunner of the savior, and, like him, God, man, and animal at once. He is both subhuman and superhuman, a bestial and divine being, whose chief and most alarming characteristic is his unconsciousness. He is so unconscious of himself that his body is not a unity, and his two hands fight each other. This primitive cosmic being possesses divine animal nature superior to humans through superhuman qualities, yet inferior through unconsciousness. Trickster myths, like many others, supposedly provide therapeutic effects, displaying earlier low intellectual and moral levels to more developed individuals so they remember yesterday's conditions. The so-called civilized man has forgotten the trickster. He remembers him only figuratively and metaphorically when, irritated by his own ineptitude, he speaks of fate playing tricks on him or of things being bewitched. He never suspects that his own hidden and apparently harmless shadow has qualities whose dangerousness exceeds his wildest dreams. Collective shadow projections. For Jung, the trickster forms part of the shadow, both dangerous to the extent we keep them hidden and project them onto others. The trickster is a collective shadow figure, a summation of all the inferior traits of character in individuals. And since the individual shadow is never absent as a component of personality, the collective figure can construct itself out of it continually, as a corresponding projection on other social groups and nations. Collective trickster energy appears in leaders who are actually great pretenders, convincing people through promised truths while delivering lies. These figures appear, disappear, and reappear throughout history. We fear external threats while remaining unaware of internal dangers from our unknown repressed aspects that cause self-loss. Our self, behind our self concealed, should startle most. The trickster accompanies us into psychological depths, the rabbit hole, to our unknown selves, through the valley of the shadow of death. Despite terror, the trickster reveals inner depths we never knew existed. Ego, deflation, and spiritual growth. While shadow helps us understand morality, the trickster focuses on reducing pride's sin. He prevents overconfidence, since hubris predicts downfall. The trickster proves crucial for individuation by deflating ego inflation when we become controlling, arrogant, or narcissistic. Healthy ego represents our identity sense, bridging inner worlds. The trickster is the ego demolitions expert who helps us become more realistic about our psychological limitations and ultimately our spiritual limitlessness. This is an energy within ourselves and within the universe that humbles us, topples our ego, upsets our plans, demonstrates to us how little our wishes matter, and dissolves the forms that no longer serve us, though we may be clinging to them for dear life. When ego reaches peak inflation, the trickster punctures our bubble of greatness with a tiny pin. As reality becomes visible, everything previously meaningful, power, money, fame, pleasure, becomes meaningless. The trickster humbles us, revealing our limited power within the vast universe. This surrender proves necessary for self-realization and divine connection. Rather than the great helping the lowly, the trickster reverses this dynamic by disguising himself as someone lowly who then overcomes the ego-inflated great person. Biblical passage expresses this trickster energy clearly. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world, and things which are despised, hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are. Regardless of how lowly or useless one might feel, something in the higher self or God continues calling. Alchemical Transformation. In alchemy, the trickster manifests as Mercurius, the Roman Hermes equivalent who flows like quicksilver. Jung observes, a curious combination of typical trickster motifs can be found in the alchemical figure of Mercurius. For instance, his fondness for sly jokes and malicious pranks, his powers as a shapeshifter, his dual nature, half animal, half divine, his exposure to all kinds of tortures, and last but not least, his approximation to the figure of a savior. Mercurius masterfully balances spirit and matter duality associated with the philosopher's stone or self. He paradoxically connects to both Christ and Lucifer as lightbringer. In comparison with the purity and unity of the Christ symbol, Mercurius lapis is ambiguous, dark, paradoxical, and thoroughly pagan. It therefore represents a part of the psyche which was certainly not molded by Christianity. In many ways it points to the devil, who is known at times to disguise himself as an angel of light. Mercurius's paradoxical nature reflects crucial self-aspects, essentially representing opposites' union, which it must be to represent any totality. The elusive philosopher's stone, alchemy's central symbol, enabling base matter transformation into gold, results from genuine trickster Mercurius, who drove alchemists to despair. For Jung, the philosopher's stone exists not externally but within ourselves. Psychological integration and balance. The trickster as alchemical Mercurius contains psychological totality, unconscious and conscious mind, known and unknown, light and darkness within us all. The psyche seeks balance, avoiding extremes while combining opposites. Alchemy's transcendent function represents where psyche finds midpoints, occurring during perfect timing synchronicity. Not enough or too much represent trickster manifestations, extremes through which we become deceived. However, the trickster attempts pointing us toward center, toward individuation paths. This recalls Aristotelian virtue ethics, virtue as midpoint between trait deficiency and excess. Confidence's golden mean lies between self-deprecation and vanity. Increased life balance corresponds with achieved psychic wholeness, cultural transformation, and individual growth. Tricksters remain perpetually present, attempting to show cultures their shadows and approaching inevitable changes. Mythologically, battles between creation and destruction forces, typified by trickster polarity, remain as vital in modernity as for ancestors. The trickster reaches world stages through individual psyches. We must resolve inner conflicts to gain clarity about outer cultural conflicts in which we seem entangled. Integrating the trickster archetype enables progression from self-centered ego dominance toward integrity and relatedness. It allows awareness of authentic emotions, behaviors, and thoughts that unconscious personas hide, without which individuation cannot occur. The trickster enables self-discovery, personality, totality, uniting conscious and unconscious opposites, maintaining everything in balanced unity. The bringer of light and healing. The trickster attempts awakening us while shaking us to our core being. Perhaps this occurs because he embodies fundamental patterns we struggle with and desperately need to reconcile within ourselves and our world. Through negotiating and disrupting conventions and boundaries, the trickster expands human potential realms. While bringing difficult lessons, he also represents the force enabling us to imagine and create entirely new possibilities. In the history of the collective, as in the history of the individual, everything depends on the development of consciousness. This gradually brings liberation from imprisonment in unconsciousness, and the trickster is therefore a bringer of light as well as of healing. The trickster ultimately serves not as destroyer but as transformer, guiding us through necessary dissolution of outdated forms toward rebirth into greater wholeness. In learning to dance with this archetypal energy rather than resist it, we discover pathways to authentic selfhood and creative renewal, both personally and culturally.